Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Huang Simin. I am delighted to have this opportunity to be here to share with you with respect to some of the actual practice in China in terms of criminal justice in case of gender-based violence. And actually, when we think about this, and we often think about cases such as raping and murdering and abusing, etc. So as a lawyer ourselves, and we also would think about this, and these are indeed very important perspectives. But today I have also included some of the perspectives from the victims and perspectives of the defense. I don't think that they are in conflict with each other. I think that they are quite an integrated party, and because the reason behind the crime is the same, and what is the root cause, we will examine this, and we think that the root cause is gender inequality and socially sanctioned discrimination against women for gender-based violence against women. Actually, there are many forms of different violence. In my PowerPoint, I have also listed them out. I'm not going to go into details because in these different formats, we can see some of which are quite light, but of course, for us, we pay attention to the heaviest form of violence. And for the other form of violence, which might be a light degree, but I think that you should also pay attention to this. Next slide of the PowerPoint, please. And this is a number of women murdered by significant others or family members by the and women. And this shows that globally speaking, there are 45,000 women murdered. And you can see that Asia and Africa are topping up the chart, and the women murdered in Asia and Africa are the highest number. And again, this shows that in various countries, this is something that's quite widespread, and it's a structural issue. This is a very serious problem. And then in the Chinese legal system, we have some very similar cases. For instance, in terms of the most common sexual violence criminal charges, rape, sexual harassment, or homicide, assault, and battery. So these are some of the areas that they would appear very quickly. And in terms of the stereotype, the type of this kind of the nature of this kind of cases, and we continue to see the situation whereby the wife has killed the husband, or in schools, and we have also read in the news that there have been a lot of reports about bullying in schools, and therefore, in terms of us representing the victim versus representing the witness, and what are the good ways to look at this. So let's go to part 2. So in this part, what I want to share with you are some of my latest cases. And in 2020 in Chongqing, there was a case, and the background of this case is that A and B, they remarried. So in 2012, they remarried, both of them. This is their second marriage. Sorry, give me a moment, please. So B is the husband, and the husband has a long-term violence history, and in his village, he has also had many arguments with his fellow villagers. In addition, in the past, he has served 1 year in a prison because of his violence. And in July that year, and for B, when he was washing his feet that evening, he wanted to rape the daughter, and the daughter was the daughter of A's daughter from the previous marriage. So the daughter is really his stepdaughter. So for B, he used some coercive language, and of course the daughter disagreed, and he then punished the daughter and asked her to kneel on the floor for a long time. And A is the mother, and she saw the daughter has kneeled on the floor for a long time, and uh, he she wanted to get her to get up, and at this time, and B then forced himself and jumped on the daughter and
Ah,
said that
Huang Simin,
he wanted
sorry,
to rape the daughter.
sorry,
And
Huang Simin.
apologies, actually, Huang Simin,
Uh,
apologies.
yeah,
I can
is
hear
this
you.
the PowerPoint, right?
Uh,
Not the one, right? We have to go back. 主页要回去的哈，对
yes,
吗？
it's the right
哦
PPT. I did
，OK，
not put the
嗯，
content in this PowerPoint. It is
哦
the right slide. I just
，OK，OK，OK，
didn't put it in my slide. I'll
OK，
continue to share with this case.
嗯，OK，
And then this mother, she then tried to beg the husband, and the husband said that the next day he's going to rape the daughter. And then for this mother, and during the 8 years of a marriage, and she was subject to uh, domestic violence, and so she felt that even if this could be prevented today, and this could not be prevented tomorrow, so she then killed her husband. So after the case took place, and her defense lawyer believes that the mother was trying to protect his daughter from being raped by the stepfather, and considering that the risks are still there, and the illegal um, and they believed that the illegal behavior from the husband will continue. However, for the prosecutor, and they believe that there is still an element of murdering, because the husband was actually sleeping at that time and wasn't actually raping uh, her daughter. So last year, and in June, and she was sentenced, and she was deemed as guilty, and there was no self-defense, but she was given a suspended service, a suspension of 3 years. And the reason for this is that even if the the husband, had threatened and abused the stepdaughter, this is a very serious crime. But then this behavior was stopped by A, and then B went to sleep. So this actual illegal behavior was stopped, and it didn't proceed. So even if B said that after tomorrow, and he's going to rape his stepdaughter, however, this did not pose any actual threat, and they feel that actually for B, for his behavior, and there uh, no, this does not really constitute as self-defense, and a lot of people feel that actually this is a form of a self-defense, because in 2002, in August that year, after a month after this has taken place, there was another new legal interpretation, and which is the guidance paper on self-defense. And one of this said that for illegal, uh, for any sort of illegal behaviors, and if it was actually, even if it was stopped, but there was such intention, and this would also continue to be prosecuted. And we can see that there are many cases like this. So, and I do think that this is a representative case. And in this process, we can see that even if there was no such, for instance, self-defense, and for this husband has a lot of behavior issues in the past, and in the past, and because of all this, and eventually this uh, husband was well, eventually, the husband behavior was condemned, and what do we need to pay attention to? And first of all, which is the um, anti Anti-Domestic Violence Act, and this came into being in 2016, not a long time, and in different provinces that they are implementing this, and I think that we have moved a long way, and for criminal lawyers to really try and understand about this act and to try to understand how this is being applied in reality is very necessary. And I think that it's a great way to collect evidence. And let's go to the next slide. So in terms of collecting of evidence on domestic violence, perhaps some of this information is not very familiar for you, but what's important is that we need to pay attention to the collecting of evidence on domestic violence, and this could help us with the defense. And in addition, it can the police can dispatch records, warning letters in injury appraisal opinions, and public security organs, etc. So all of these could be submitted, and for instance, in terms of medical records, medical bills, or audio and video recordings of the domestic violence committed by the perpetrator. Such audios and videos, for instance, some of their letter of guarantees, letter of promise, and letter of repentance, witness testimony, including minor children's testimony. Of course, it also includes statement of the victim and electronic evidence. To collect such evidence as much as possible and to prove the point is very helpful towards defending oneself. And another point, which is on self-defense, and self-defense in China, and it's really to make sure that for any unlawful acts, and we need to stop the unlawful infringement of other people's rights and property, or other acts rights of the actor of other people that cause harm to the unlawful infringer. To constitute justifiable defense, the 5 conditions need to be met. Those are cost, time, subjectivity, object, and the limit. So these are the latest legal interpretation of self-defense, and we need to understand what it actually means. So in order to prevent such domestic violence cases from happening, and we then need to have a specific range of activities, and if they go beyond this range, and of course they will be punished. And in China, for instance, for some of the special for some of these special cases, and such as rape, murder, etc. And even if this would lead to the abuse of death, and in those cases, and that would mean that it's a self defense, and so the person exercising self-defense would not need to shoulder any responsibility for the death of the perpetrator. So for the criminal lawyers, we would also need to understand about these latest laws and articles and provisions. And in addition, we need to pay attention to the interpretation of this guidance. And in addition, the interpretation of Supreme China's courts on several issues concerning applications of the general provision of the Civil Code of the People's Republic of China 2022. This is something that we need to pay attention to. And in addition, in terms of exploring cooperation from multiple parties, such as working with the media. So these are areas whereby, as criminal lawyers, we need to pay attention to such points. Actually, in those sexual violence cases, for us, we would sometimes also represent the victim and to help the victims to maintain their rights. And here I would like to share with you some of these cases based on my experience, such as I have mentioned just now. There will be some sexual violence cases, taking place at schools. And in 2013 and 2019, I had represented a case in Ningxia. So for this case, actually, the victims, they are girls from a Hui minority. There are 12 of them. And the perpetrator teacher was in his 60s, and he was a Han person. And using his opportunity as their teachers, he then started abusing these girls sexually. So for this case, because it happened very early on, and those days we did not have a lot of legal interpretations. In addition, in our criminal law, and the protection for the victims is not enough. It's far from enough. For instance, for these young girls, a lot of the times the trauma they are left with is not simply just physical, but what's more is the mental torture that they were subject to, not only them, but also their families. But for this part, the criminal law does not support any sort of mental compensation. And we then considered to use the 2014 uh, interpretation for children. And we then thought about this, expanded the scope of compensation and turned emotional stress into rehabilitation expenses. And we looked for these experts who can help these young girls, and these experts' opinions were taken into consideration by the court. I think that this is a great example that shows when there are situations, for instance, if it is not as ideal, and what can we do to maintain or protect the rights of the victims. And the case took place in Ningxia Autonomous Region, and I remember that in all these cases, it wasn't uh, compensation that they were most worried about. It was changing schools. And for the Education Bureau, they were actually very distant about this. And we have also published relevant case information, and which has facilitated with the girls moving to other schools. And this has also facilitated the government how they can pay more attention to this case, and they would also be able to consider about the obligations uh, of these people involved. And when we made this, and of course, what we were trying to do to bring them in is so that we have a momentum to try and solve this problem. So that has played some role, and these young girls at the end of the day, and through mediation, they were able to receive some compensation. So through this case, and my personal feeling is that starting from the focus simply on the case itself, we need to expand into the rights perspective. For instance, the rights of the accused, and we need to look at the UN Charter of Human Rights. And in addition, apart from being a lawyer, I feel that I have also got in touch with the different professions, such as the medical field, as well as communicating with the media, etc. And it's basically because we did not have a very healthy children's protection system, and for the lawyers themselves, and basically they lack the support from other lawyers, from other peers. The lawyers have taken some work, and for us as the representative, we ourselves, we also need to pay attention to the relevant knowledge as well as the skills, and we also need to have the ability to deal with these cases. And this case is a case that I worked on in 2019. And again, this was in a primary school in a village. There were over 10 girls who were only 4 to 5 years of age, and through getting evidence, and we had communicated with the girls, and we had realized that there were actually elements of raping in there, but we have not really received any training about how to ask questions when the girls are so young. So we then used some other methods, and of course, with a lot of help from our friends, we have bought quite a few dolls, and through these dolls, and we pretended that we were there just playing these finger puppets with them, and to tell them a story and get these girls to tell us about what had actually happened. We had also submitted this to the court, and after submission, the court felt that it needs to be further bolstered, and therefore raping was included in the end in one of the charges. And so you can see that all of these different methods can help us to see how we can protect the rights of the victim. And in this case, for instance, to respect the opinions and their expressions by the young children, and to also talk about it in a way that they can understand it. And of course, this would also mean that for lawyers, we ourselves, we need to make sure that we can respect children, and we also need to be able to have empathy. So I have also listed out, for instance, in pre and after the trial, and in terms of the experience that we can pass on to the victims. And that would be on the page 16 of the PowerPoint. I'm on page 16 of the PowerPoint. So in terms of what I have presented, and I think that during our work progress, overall speaking, there are other things that we can do. And for instance, to raise awareness about gender, to try and learn about gender. And I think that's very important for representing a case, especially in a specific case for the prosecutor or defense if it's a male, and you can also ask about the female around you and to ask for their feedback. And this would actually help us to understand better and more about the case, and to find a point where we can come into it. And secondly, because these cases, a lot of the times behind it, it has the missing puzzle. And therefore, for we ourselves, in terms of the cases that we have taken on, we need to see that which range does it fall into, and we would also be able to combine this with the domestic law and the international convention, and in terms of some of these content, and so that we can talk about it. And I think that in the interest of time, perhaps I'll stop here, and let's see if there are any questions. Okay, great. Thank you.